Here is the list of things that were not supposed to happen today. 1. Receive a royal summons embossed with a wolf's head so fancy it probably had a better credit score than I did. 2. Walk into the actual, literal Moonstone Palace, a place I'd only ever seen on commemorative plates and one very regrettable tea towel my mother kept in the guest bathroom. 3. Discover that my new client, the allegedly demonic, untrainable, beast of pure chaos royal wolfhound, was, in fact, a perfect angel who probably volunteered at soup kitchens in his spare time. And 4. Realize that the king of all werewolves, the alpha of alphas, Rob Moonborn himself, had the social grace of a startled goat and was looking at me like I was the only life raft on the Titanic. My name is Sage Wilder. I'm an Omega, my bank account is perpetually terrified, and I train dogs. This was, without a doubt, the weirdest Tuesday of my life. So we're doing this, her wolf said. The wolf's voice was flat, unsurprised, and carried the energy of a woman who had seen too much and been adequately compensated for none of it. We're walking into the royal palace with dog treats in our pocket and a hole in our left boot. This is fine. Everything is fine. Shut up, Sage thought. I'm just saying, her wolf replied. Somebody should be keeping minutes for the inevitable inquest. I stood in the king's private study, a room so large my entire apartment could fit in its fireplace, with enough space left over for my landlord's disappointment in me. Sunlight streamed through arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing like tiny, opulent fairies who had better things to do but were putting in the hours. The air smelled of old books, lemon polish, and something else, something warm and wild and deeply unsettling that made the back of my neck prickle. Him, her wolf noted. That smell is him, just so we're aware. Filing this under developing complications and moving on. The source of the smell, King Rob, was currently staring at a potted fern with the intensity of a man trying to solve complex trigonometry via photosynthesis. He was not what I expected. The portraits showed a stern, powerful alpha king with cheekbones that could cut glass and a jawline that suggested it had opinions about fiscal policy. The man in front of me was wearing a horribly knitted sweater with a lopsided badger on it, 6 legs, which was either a bold artistic choice or a fundamental misunderstanding of mammalian biology, and hadn't made eye contact with me once. He looked less like the ruler of an ancient werewolf dynasty and more like a very anxious librarian who had wandered into the wrong building and was too polite to leave. Beside him, with a posture that would make a Queen's Guard weep with envy, sat Bartholomew. The monster. The demon. The reason for the very serious, very gilded summons currently burning a hole in my satchel. Bartholomew, a creature the size of a small pony with fur the color of thunderclouds and eyes like warm amber, yawned, a delicate little sound, like a duchess stifling a sneeze at the opera, and then rested his massive head on the king's knee. So, I began, my voice a squeak. I cleared my throat, channeling every ounce of professionalism I owned, which was approximately enough to fill a thimble. Your Majesty, the summons mentioned behavioral issues? Rob flinched, his gaze snapping from the fern to a particularly interesting spot on the ceiling. Yes, severe. He's uncontrollable. Bartholomew blinked slowly, the picture of canine serenity. He then, and I am not making this up, offered me his paw. I stared at the paw. It was a very polite, very well-mannered paw. I took it. His shake was firm but gentle, businesslike even, as though he were closing a deal on a modest but tasteful country estate. I looked back at the king. He was now sweating. Uncontrollable, I repeated, deadpan. Rob nodded, a jerky, desperate movement. Completely. He chews. The furniture. He does not, her wolf said. Look at this room. The furniture is immaculate. The dog is immaculate. The only thing in distress is the man in the badger sweater, and frankly, the sweater is in worse shape than he is. I scanned the room, confirming what my wolf already knew. Every chair leg was pristine. Every tapestry was untroubled by teeth. The only thing that looked remotely distressed was the king himself. My business, Wilder Wolfables, was built on one principle. No dog is a bad dog, just a misunderstood one. I'd handled snarling, traumatized rescues who'd been used as bait in fighting rings. I'd rehabilitated wolves who thought mailmen were a personal affront to their honor. I had a scar on my left arm from a poodle named Cupcake, and the emotional scars from Cupcake were arguably worse. I was not afraid of a challenge. The problem was, I couldn't find one. Okay, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of confidence. Let's see what we're working with. Bartholomew, sit. The dog sat. His tail gave a single polite thump against the priceless Aubusson rug, as though applauding itself for a job well done. Stay. I walked to the other side of the room, picked up a squeaky toy shaped like a squirrel from the basket of pristine, unchewed toys, and squeaked it. Bartholomew did not move. His eyes, wise and ancient and vaguely judgmental, followed me, but his haunches remained firmly planted. I walked back and gave him a treat from my pocket, which he took with the delicacy of a dowager accepting a pearl. Your Majesty, I said slowly, turning back to the profusely sweating monarch. This dog has better manners than most of my relatives, and I say that with love. Also accuracy. Rob ran a hand through his dark hair, making it stand on end. It did not make him look less attractive, which felt deeply unfair. Ah, yes. Well, he has hidden issues. He looked at Bartholomew, who looked back with an expression of pure, unadulterated love. Deeply hidden. So deeply hidden they do not exist, her wolf observed. This is a scam. A well-funded, royally sanctioned scam, but a scam nonetheless. Our rent is due. Take the money, ask no questions. This is the most financially responsible decision we've made in 6 years. I sighed, my wolf's pragmatism battling my professional ethics, and winning by a landslide. The rent on my apartment was due, my van needed a new alternator, and this job paid more than I usually made in 6 months. If the king wanted to pay me to have a staring contest with a perfect dog, who was I to argue? My pride said this was suspicious. My bank account told my pride to shut up and sit down. Smart girl, her wolf said. Finally, we agree on something. All right, Your Majesty, I said, pulling out my notepad. Tell me everything. For the next hour, he listed Bartholomew's alleged sins. Apparently, the dog would howl at inopportune moments, stare with unnerving intensity, and, my personal favorite, project an aura of silent judgment. I wrote it all down, nodding seriously, while Bartholomew fell asleep and began to snore. A soft rumbling sound like a tiny distant volcano, plotting something, but not in a rush about it. He's literally asleep, her wolf noted. The accused is unconscious. We are being paid to take notes on a napping dog. This is the greatest job we've ever had. This was going to be a very, very long job. From Rob's perspective, things were not going to plan. Analysis. Initial contact with Target Omega has failed to establish the designated pretext, his wolf stated, crisp as a military report. Subject appears to perceive primary asset Bartholomew as non-hostile. Shut up, Rob thought, his heart hammering. He was the Alpha King. He'd faced down rogue packs and vampire lords, but this small Omega with flower on her cheek had completely dismantled his entire nervous system, and no amount of royal training had prepared for it. Because here was the thing that made this whole situation so much worse, so much more pathetic, so much more excruciatingly, bone-deep embarrassing. He had been in love with Sage Wilder since he was 16 years old. 12 years. 12 years of pining. His wolf had once calculated the cost per year of the crush and presented it as an itemized emotional invoice. The total was, quote, staggering and inadvisable. It had started at the Pack Festival, the annual gathering in the meadow below the palace. He'd been crown prince then, a gangly, awkward teenager drowning in a ceremonial cloak 3 sizes too big, being paraded around by his father to meet important people whose names he immediately forgot. Then he'd seen her, a girl with tangled hair and muddy knees, crouched behind the honeycake stall, cradling a stray that was being chased off by the vendors. Everyone else had thrown rocks. She had thrown herself between the dog and its tormentors, feeding it pieces of her own honeycake, in a voice so gentle it made something crack open in his chest. Assessment. Strong emotional imprint detected, his wolf supplied. Subject displayed exceptional courage and empathy, cross-referenced against the Crown Prince's known deficiencies in social aptitude, which are extensive. I know they're extensive, Rob thought miserably. He hadn't spoken to her. He had tried. He had walked towards her, tripped on his ceremonial cloak, stumbled into the honeycake stall, caused a minor avalanche of pastries, and then, while lying face down in a pile of crushed desserts, had looked up to see her staring at him with wide, startled eyes, before being whisked away by his mortified father, who had said, in a voice that could freeze lava, "We will never speak of this." She wouldn't remember him. He was just a pastry-covered footnote in the day she saved a stray dog. But he remembered her. He'd kept quiet track of her over the years. He knew she'd started her own dog training business, the best in the territory. He knew the world had not been kind to an Omega with more talent than opportunity. Correction, his wolf noted. You used the intelligence briefings. There was a file. A small file, his wolf conceded, cross-referenced with the Municipal Dog Licensing Registry, and 2 instances of casual surveillance from the Royal Observation Corps. For security purposes, Rob agreed. Absolutely. This is normal behavior for a head of state. We are not going to examine it further. This was why the dog ruse had been conceived, not because he was too proud to meet Sage, because he was too terrified. He could not walk into a dog training business and say, "Hello, you don't remember me, but when I was 16 you fed a stray dog a honey cake, and I have been quietly, pathetically, devotedly in love with you ever since." That sentence had a 0% chance of not ending with a restraining order. So, the dog. The plan had been Julian's idea, technically. Or rather, Julian had listened to Rob agonize for 45 minutes, thrown a handful of peanuts at his head, and said, "Just hire her to train Bartholomew. He's the best dog alive, so you'll need to be there to explain the problems, which means you'll be forced to talk to her, and the whole time you'll have the social buffer of a third party who can't judge you, because he's a dog." Rob had called it brilliant strategy. Julian had called it the saddest thing I've ever facilitated, and I once helped your father rehearse a toast for an ambassador he openly despised. The problem was Bartholomew, not his behavior. His behavior was, as the entire kingdom knew, immaculate. The problem was that Bartholomew appeared to be actively sabotaging the ruse. Within 10 minutes of Sage's arrival, the dog had offered her a handshake, performed an unprompted sit, and was now gazing at her with the adoring expression of a creature who had found his new favorite person and was prepared to make it everyone's problem. Operational assessment. The pretext is holding, but structural weaknesses are apparent, his wolf observed. He literally offered her a handshake, Rob thought. We may need to discuss his loyalties. Julian, who had been watching from the corridor, had poked his head into mouth. He's supposed to be the bad dog, Rob. Then he'd retreated, shaking his head. Cross-reference. Palace betting pool currently stands at 340 gold on "The King Will Confess Within 3 Weeks" versus 120 gold on "The Dog Trainer Figures It Out First." Julian holds the book. He bet on "Catastrophic Reveal Involving Property Damage" at 15-1 odds, for the record. Rob elected not to think about that. The next Tuesday, Sage arrived with a canvas bag full of puzzle toys, agility cones, and what appeared to be a small obstacle course designed for a dog roughly the size of a pony. She set it all up in the study with brisk, professional efficiency, while Rob perched on a divan, a notebook open on his lap. He never wrote dog training notes in it. "All right, Bartholomew, let's see how you do with problem solving." She placed a treat inside a Kong toy, wedged it inside a puzzle box, put the puzzle box inside a larger puzzle box, and placed the whole contraption on the floor. It was a challenge she normally reserved for working dogs with months of enrichment training. Bartholomew looked at it, looked at Sage, looked back at the contraption. Then, with the methodical precision of a safecracker, He dismantled the entire thing in 43 seconds, extracted the treat, and ate it with an expression that suggested he found the exercise quaint, but was too polite to say so. 43 seconds, her wolf reported. That's faster than Cupcake, and Cupcake had thumbs. Well, functionally. She had a grip like a longshoreman and a moral compass that pointed exclusively south. Sage said, writing something in her notes. That was terrible, Rob supplied quickly. He usually takes much longer. He's having a good day. Bartholomew, as if personally offended by this slander, picked up one of the agility cones, carried it to the corner, and placed it neatly beside the others. Then he returned to his spot, circled twice, and lay down with a sigh that communicated very clearly that he had done his part and the humans could sort out the rest. He's tidying up, her wolf said. The allegedly untrainable dog is tidying up. He's a better housekeeper than we are, and I say that knowing full well what's behind our refrigerator. She looked at the king. He was writing in his notebook again, head bent, the tip of his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. He hadn't looked at Bartholomew once during the entire exercise. He's staring at us again, her wolf said, specifically at the flower on our cheek. Sage subtly wiped her cheek. The flour smudge migrated to a different part of her face. Progress. She was a professional. She could work with this. Whatever this was. Your Majesty, she said, testing something. What if I tried some desensitization work? Loud noises, unexpected stimuli? Yes, Rob said, with the enthusiasm of a man grasping at any excuse. He's very sensitive. To noises. All noises. He hates them. She pulled a stack of metal baking trays from her bag and dropped them. The clatter echoed for 4 seconds, bouncing off the stone walls, rattling the windows, and causing a small porcelain figurine on the mantel to wobble dangerously. Bartholomew opened one eye, sighed, and went back to sleep. Rob, on the other hand, jumped so violently he launched his tea off the armrest. The cup sailed in a graceful arc, deposited its contents across a cushion, and landed upside down on the floor. Earl Grey, 2 sugars, no milk. Sage could tell from the color. The dog didn't even flinch, her wolf noted. Meanwhile, the king jumped so hard he's now wearing his tea. On a related note, Earl Grey, 2 sugars, no milk. I'm just recording data, no reason. Very sensitive, Sage repeated. He hides it well, Rob said, mopping at the cushion with his sleeve. Bartholomew, from across the room, lifted his head and looked directly at Sage. His amber eyes held an expression she'd seen before. On therapy dogs, on emotional support animals, on creatures who understood more than they should. The look said, quite plainly, I know. He knows I know. We're all in on it except you, and frankly, I think it's time. Then he stood up, padded across the room, picked up the notebook that had slipped from Rob's lap during the tea incident, and carried it to Sage. He placed it at her feet, sat down, and looked at her expectantly. Rob went white. Bartholomew, he said, in a voice that was trying very hard to be authoritative and was mostly just thin. Bring that back. Bartholomew did not bring it back. Bartholomew, in fact, pushed the notebook closer to Sage's foot with his nose, then looked up at her with an expression that was, there was no other word for it, conspiratorial. He was helping. The dog is staging a coup, her wolf reported. He has defected. He has chosen a side, and it is not the king's. This is either the greatest act of canine loyalty I've ever witnessed, or the most sophisticated betrayal. And honestly, the line between those is thinner than people think. Sage's curiosity, the same curiosity that had once led her to physically wrestle a Kong toy from a 100-pound mastiff, got the better of her. She picked up the notebook and opened it. The page was covered in his handwriting, a surprisingly elegant script for a man who seemed to have the coordination of a newborn giraffe. But it wasn't notes on dog training. It was a list. Things Sage likes. 1. Earl Grey tea, 2 sugars, no milk. Considers milk in Earl Grey a moral failing. 2. Old, worn-out boots. Specifically the brown ones with the scuff on the left toe. 3. The smell of rain. mentioned twice, once with her eyes closed. 4. Dogs with floppy ears, stated with conviction, will argue the point. 5. Arguing about the merits of different treat brands, becomes visibly passionate, uses hand gestures. Below the list were several very detailed, very bad drawings of her face. In one, she appeared to have 3 eyebrows. In another, her smile occupied roughly 60% of her head. They were terrible. They were also, and she would never in her life admit this to anyone, the most flattering things anyone had ever drawn of her. She stared at the page, her brain refusing to process what she was seeing. This wasn't a training log. This was reconnaissance. "Oh no," her wolf said. She looked up at the king. His face was a shade of red she had previously only seen on fire hydrants. He looked like he was about to spontaneously combust, and honestly, it might have been a mercy. "Oh, no, no, no," her wolf continued. "The drawings. He drew us, multiple times. This is either the most romantic thing that's ever happened to us, or the beginning of a true crime documentary. Based on the eyebrow count, I genuinely cannot tell." "These are very detailed notes," she managed to say, her voice impressively steady. From Rob's point of view, this was the end of the world. The dog had betrayed him, his own dog. The one creature in the palace he trusted implicitly had picked up his most private possession and hand-delivered it to the woman he was trying to impress. It was, in a sense, exactly what a good dog would do. "Catastrophic intelligence breach," his wolf announced. "Recommend immediate activation of protocol feign sudden, unforeseen death." "That's not a real protocol." "It is now." She was looking at the terrible drawing of her smile, the one where he'd given her teeth that looked like a piano keyboard. She looked up and her expression wasn't angry. It was baffled. "You've been observing me?" she asked. "Current recommended strategy, groveling. Probability of success, 6%. Rob could only nod, the kind of nod a man gives when his lawyer asks if he understands the charges. His beta, Julian, who had been observing the disaster from the doorway, not with popcorn this time, but with a small ledger in which he appeared to be recording the outcome, chose this moment to make his presence known. "Having fun, Your Majesty? I told you the drawings were a bad idea. You gave her 3 eyebrows in that last one. 3, Rob. Julian, I will have you reassigned to latrine duty in the coldest outpost in my kingdom." "Worth it," Julian said, making a note in the ledger. "Also, you should know the palace staff betting pool has officially closed. Miriam from the kitchens won 200 gold. She bet on The Dog Exposes Everything, which, in retrospect, we should all have seen coming." Rob shot him a look that could curdle milk. Sage was staring at the notebook, then at Rob. Her brain was catching up. The perfect dog, the non-existent issues, the absurdly high fee. It wasn't about the dog. It had never been about the dog. "Oh," her wolf said, very quietly. "Oh, Sage, it's us. We're the assignment." Sage went home that night and did not sleep. She lay on her narrow bed above the bakery, the smell of proving dough seeping through the floorboards, and stared at the ceiling while her wolf paced. "Facts," her wolf said. "He's been watching us. He has a list. He drew our face, badly, multiple times. The dog is a prop. This is either a love story or a security briefing, and I genuinely cannot determine which without more data." "He could just be eccentric," Sage thought. "He's a king. Kings are allowed to be eccentric. It's basically in the job description." Kings who are just eccentric don't write down how you take your tea. That's not eccentricity, Sage. That's devotion in a minor key. And the drawing with the 3 eyebrows suggests devotion unchecked by artistic talent, which is somehow worse and also better. She came back the next session with a decision. Not to run, her rent was still due, but to push. If this was a joke at her expense, she wanted to know now, while she still had the armor on. She walked into the study, bypassed the king and the perfectly behaved wolfhound entirely, and planted her hands on her hips. "All right, Your Majesty. We need to talk." Rob, who had been attempting to casually lean against a bookshelf, he'd been practicing, she could tell, and the practice had not paid dividends, went rigid. His elbow caught a leather-bound volume, which knocked into a decorative scroll case, which rolled off the shelf and struck a small bronze bust of his grandfather, which rocked back and forth on its pedestal while the entire room held its breath. The bust settled. Nothing crashed. Close, his wolf observed. Structural integrity of the bookshelf, 92%. Structural integrity of the pretext, significantly lower. Is something wrong with Bartholomew? Rob asked. No, Sage said, her voice dangerously calm. Nothing is wrong with Bartholomew. Bartholomew is a saint. Bartholomew could probably broker world peace if you gave him a decent biscuit and a window seat. The problem, Your Majesty, is that this dog does not need training. Rob swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He has latent issues. No, he doesn't. You've been paying me an obscene amount of money to play fetch with a dog who already knows how to fetch, and sit, and stay, and probably file his own taxes. I saw your notebook. I saw the drawings. I saw the list. She took a breath. Either you think I'm an idiot, or there's something else going on. So which is it? She was an Omega. She was speaking to the Alpha King. This was probably treason. At the very least, it was career suicide. But her inadequacy wound, the one that constantly whispered she wasn't good enough, was screaming that this whole situation was a joke at her expense, and she'd had enough. She was a good trainer. She didn't need to be humored. We're about to be fired from the best-paying job we've ever had, Sage's wolf noted. Alternatively, we're about to learn something that changes everything. 50-50 odds. Our entire life has been 50-50 odds. Carry on. Rob looked at her, his face a mixture of terror and desperation. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Julian, who had materialized in the doorway again, because Julian had a supernatural ability to appear at the precise moment of maximum awkwardness. And Julian gave him a thumbs up and mouthed, "Don't mess this up." He looked at Bartholomew, who rested his chin on Sage's knee and looked up at her with soulful eyes as if to say, "For what it's worth, I think you're handling this very well." Finally, he met her gaze. "What if I need the training?" he said, the confession rushing out of him in a torrent of mortified honesty. "I'm the king. I've been the king since I was 26. I know how to negotiate trade deals and review troop deployments and sit through 7-hour council meetings without falling asleep, although that last one is debatable. But I don't know how to do this." He gestured vaguely between the two of them. "I don't know how to talk to someone I like. Someone who isn't trying to get something from me. The dog was my excuse. It was a stupid excuse. I'm sorry." The silence that followed was profound. Then Rob took a breath and said the rest of it, the part he hadn't planned. "I've known about you for a long time, Sage. Since the Pack Festival. 12 years ago." Sage stared at him. "The Pack Festival?" "The Pack Festival," her wolf repeated. 12 years ago. We were 16. The stray dog. The honey cakes. The boy who destroyed the pastry stall. "You were feeding a stray dog behind the honey cake stall," he said. And now he couldn't stop. The confession was a dam breaking and everything was flooding out. "You were 16, and these vendors were chasing this dog, throwing things at it, and you put yourself between them and this terrified animal, and you fed it your own food, and you talked to it. And I was 16 too, and I tripped over my cloak trying to walk towards you, and I fell face first into a pastry display, and my father said, 'We will never speak of this.' And his security team dragged me away, and you looked at me like I was the strangest thing you'd ever seen, and you were right, I was, and I have thought about you every single day since." The silence now was different. It was the kind of silence that follows a detonation, where the air itself seems to need a moment. "He was the pastry boy," her wolf said, in a tone of absolute, shell-shocked wonder. "The pastry boy is the king. The king is the pastry boy." I need to sit down. I don't have legs that work that way, but I need to sit down. Sage's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You were the pastry boy?" she said, her voice faint. Rob's face crumpled. "You remember?" A boy in a gold cloak destroyed an entire honeycake stall and was carried away by a very large, very angry man, Sage said. Yes, I remember. The baker cried. I sent him compensation, Rob said quickly. Anonymously. A lot of compensation. He was able to open a second location. That was you? It was the least I could do. I destroyed his livelihood and his Tuesday. He paused. My father was furious. He called it the most undignified display in the history of the Moonborn line, which, given that one of our ancestors once challenged a river to a duel, is really saying something. Execute tactical assessment, his wolf urged. Read her body language. Is she going to run? Is she going to laugh? Is she going to have us arrested? The probabilities are unhelpfully even. She was staring at him, not angry, not laughing, something else. Something he didn't have the vocabulary for, because his emotional education had been conducted by a man who expressed affection through trade policy. She's still here, his wolf observed. She hasn't left. Update probability models accordingly. Also, your sweater has unraveled at the left cuff. Don't draw attention to it. Sage looked at the man in front of her, the Alpha King, ruler of all werewolf packs on the continent, who had tripped into a pastry stall 12 years ago and had been carrying the embarrassment like a small, precious, humiliating flame ever since. He had not hired her because of some supernatural recognition. He had not been compelled by fate or destiny. He had just liked her, for 12 years. Quietly and from afar, and badly, and with terrible drawings. He remembered the honeycake, her wolf said. And for the first time, the dry, exhausted voice was not dry. He remembered us feeding that dog. 12 years. He remembered. Nobody remembers us, Sage. Nobody. And he did. Her brain stalled, rebooted, and then promptly blue-screened. She looked at the perfect dog, now gazing up at his master, with the patient devotion of a therapist who couldn't bill for overtime. And she looked at the king, who was standing before her with his heart in his hands, and the emotional sophistication of a man who had once tried to woo her with a fabricated dog behavior problem. And she made a decision. Okay, she said. Here's what's going to happen. She watched something shift in his face. Fear, hope, more fear. You are going to take me to dinner. Not because I forgive the deception, not because I think this is normal, but because I have been training your perfectly behaved dog for 2 weeks, and you owe me a meal that doesn't come from the palace kitchen, where I'm pretty sure everything is seasoned with the tears of overworked sous chefs. We are coaching the Alpha King on how to ask us on a date, her wolf said. This is simultaneously the most ridiculous and the most effective negotiating position we have ever been in. Play this hand well. He looked like a man being asked to defuse a bomb with a fork, while the fork was also on fire. Execute directive, ask her out, his wolf commanded. Confidence posture engaged. Verbal script initiated. Cross-reference with subject's established preferences. Under no circumstances mention tariffs. Sage Wilder, he began, his voice suddenly stiff and formal, like he was reading a proclamation to a room full of foreign dignitaries. Would you do me the honor of accompanying me to a state-sanctioned nutritional intake event? Sage stared at him. Julian, from the doorway, made a sound like a man who had been shot. Bartholomew whined softly. A what? Sage asked. Dinner, Rob croaked, his formal posture collapsing like a poorly made soufflé. Would you go to dinner with me? Say yes, her wolf said. We've eaten cereal for dinner 3 nights this week. Say yes for the food alone. The emotional component is a bonus. A slow smile spread across Sage's face. The knot of anxiety in her stomach, the one that had been there for 2 weeks, finally, blessedly, uncoiled. Yes, Your Majesty. Rob's face flooded with so much relief he looked lightheaded. You will? I will, but on one condition. Anything. The dog attends, she said, scratching Bartholomew behind the ears. He's my chaperone, and frankly, he's earned it. Rob broke into a grin so wide and genuine it transformed his entire face. He looked younger, happier, and suddenly a lot more like the pastry boy. It's a date. Julian, from the doorway, started a slow clap. Bravo, Your Majesty. You managed to form a complete, coherent sentence. There's hope for you yet. I'm going to have this moment framed. I'm also going to need to pay out the betting pool. Miriam's going to be insufferable. Rob threw a decorative pillow at him. It sailed wide by a good 4 feet. Phase 2. Courtship, his wolf stated, with a note of something suspiciously like pride. Commencing now. May the goddess have mercy on us all. Phase 2. Dinner, Sage's wolf stated. With a king. Who drew our face with 3 eyebrows? May the goddess have mercy on our outfit, because we own nothing appropriate. The date was, against all odds, not a complete disaster. It was merely a series of small, escalating calamities that somehow added up to something wonderful. Rob had, in an act of what his wolf termed aggressive logistical affection, booked the entire fanciest restaurant in the capital city, the Royal Rose. Every table. All of them. The building had a capacity of 200. There were 2 of them. Well, 3, counting Bartholomew. Sage arrived to find it completely empty, save for 100 flickering candles, a string quartet playing a surprisingly good rendition of a pop song, and 1 very nervous king. He was wearing a new sweater. This one had a wolf on it. The wolf appeared to have 2 tails and an existential crisis. But the knitting was marginally better than the badger. Bartholomew, wearing a small, tasteful bow tie, was already seated on a plush cushion beside their table. He greeted Sage with a dignified tail wag that seemed to say, "Ah, you've arrived. Excellent. I've reviewed the wine list. The 2019 is acceptable." He rented the entire building, her wolf reported. 200 empty seats. For us. This is either the grandest romantic gesture in history or the loneliest dinner party ever conceived. Our last date was 6 months ago, and the man split the bill for a sandwich. Recalibrating expectations. You booked the whole restaurant? Sage asked, her voice faint as she took in the cavernous, empty space. Rob, who was trying to pour her water and was mostly pouring it onto the tablecloth, nodded. I thought it would be less pressure. Sage looked around at the 4 waiters, 3 chefs, and 1 sommelier all staring at them with undisguised curiosity, the way scientists observe a particularly rare and confusing species in its natural habitat. Right, less pressure. The first 20 minutes were excruciating. Rob knocked over his wine glass, talked at length about tariff reforms in the southern provinces. He's talking about tariffs, her wolf said. We are on a date, in a rented restaurant. And the king of all werewolves is explaining import duties on southern grain exports. This is, without exaggeration, the worst flirting I have ever witnessed. And I was present for every one of our own attempts, which is saying something. Avoid tariffs, Rob's wolf was saying at that exact moment, in a tone of increasing desperation. This was item 1 on the briefing. Item 1. Import duties are not foreplay. Cease and desist. And at one point, seemed to forget how to use a fork, holding it like a man who had read about forks but never personally encountered one. Sage, in a fit of her own social anxiety, responded by giving a detailed 10-minute lecture on the digestive benefits of different kibble types. She covered fiber content. She discussed protein ratios. She used the phrase optimal stool consistency in a fine dining establishment. It was a masterclass in awkwardness. Did we just say stool consistency to a king? Her wolf asked. At dinner? Near food? We did. Incredible. We're worse than he is. I didn't think that was possible. He's setting a historically low bar and we've tunneled under it. Bartholomew, sensing the conversational death spiral, nudged Rob's hand with his nose, then stood up, padded around the table, and placed his head on Sage's knee. He looked back at Rob with an expression that clearly communicated, "Fix this. I have provided you a bridge. Use it." Tactical intervention from primary asset, Rob's wolf supplied. Subject is displaying signs of conversational distress. Reference intelligence file, things Sage likes. Rain. She likes rain. Rob took a breath. "So," he said, abandoning tariffs, "I hear you like rain." Sage blinked. Yes, it's nice." "I also enjoy precipitation," Rob said, nodding seriously. "It's very wet." "Well," Sage's wolf said, "there it is. Precipitation is very wet. The earth-shattering romantic observation of our generation. Somewhere, a poet is weeping." That was not the scripted line, his wolf noted. The scripted line was, "What's your favorite thing about rainy days?" You improvised. Never improvise. Sage stared at him for a long moment, during which Rob died several small internal deaths, and then she started to laugh. Not a polite titter, but a real, helpless, snorting laugh. The sound echoed in the massive, empty dining room, bouncing off 200 vacant chairs. Rob's face fell. Was that the wrong thing to say? "No," she gasped, wiping a tear from her eye. "No, it was perfect. Oh, goddess, we're both terrible at this, aren't we?" And just like that, the tension shattered. Like a pane of glass hit by a well-thrown shoe, it just broke. And what was behind it was warmth. They were just two deeply awkward people, one of whom happened to be a king, trying and failing to have a normal conversation. And the failing was, it turned out, the most normal part. "This is going well," her wolf admitted, grudgingly. "He's funny. We weren't prepared for funny." Recalibrating threat level from suspicious to cautiously optimistic. "Don't get used to it. The subject is laughing," his wolf reported. Genuine laughter, not diplomatic laughter, not humoring the monarch laughter. Genuine. This has not occurred in any of the simulations. Updating all models. The rest of dinner was easier. They talked about dogs, about growing up in the shadow of expectation. His a throne, hers the quiet invisibility of an omega. He let something slip about his parents, casually, the way people drop heavy things and pretend they're light. My father would have hated this restaurant. He considered dining with fewer than 30 people a waste of silverware. Sage heard the weight under the words. She filed it away. And they talked about his terrible sweater collection, which, he confessed with genuine pride, he knitted himself. "The badger took me 3 months," he said. "It was supposed to be a fox." "It has 6 legs," Sage pointed out. Artistic license. She found herself relaxing, leaning forward, actually enjoying herself. He was funny, genuinely, surprisingly funny, with a dry, self-deprecating wit that was nothing like his stiff public persona. The pastry boy was still in there, she realized, just buried under 12 years of crown and duty and people who wanted things from him. He'd been so lonely, and she recognized the shape of that loneliness because it was the same shape as her own. By the 4th date, a walk through the palace gardens with Bartholomew trotting between them like a furry, judgmental chaperone, things had shifted. The awkwardness hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed. It was no longer the awkwardness of two strangers performing politeness. It was the awkwardness of two people who liked each other and were terrified of ruining it. Sage found herself talking about things she never talked about. Her mother, who had died when Sage was 19. The years after, when she'd built her business on stubbornness and ramen noodles. The way she talked to dogs because they were the only ones who listened without wanting something. Rob, in turn, told her about his father. Not the public version, the real one. A man who showed love through critique and measured affection in accomplishments. A father who had never said, "I'm proud of you," because pride, in Aldrich's world, was a strategic vulnerability. They had a politically perfect bond, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Two powerful alphas from rival packs. Their union ended a war. Everyone said it was the greatest match in a century. "But," Sage prompted gently. "But they made each other miserable. My mother left when I was 12. It was presented as a diplomatic posting, but everyone knew. My father never mentioned her again." He paused, watching Bartholomew investigate a fascinating patch of clover. "He sends me letters now, from the estate. They read like performance reviews." The vulnerability in his eyes made Sage's chest ache. "He loves that dog the way we love our strays," her wolf said finally. "Not as a pet, as proof. Proof that he's allowed to love something without it being a transaction." Sage reached out and took his hand. He startled at the contact, then held on like she'd thrown him a rope. "He's a very good boy," she said softly. "He really is," Rob agreed, his voice thick. They stood there in the garden, hand in hand, while the world's most dignified wolfhound ate a clover flower and seemed deeply satisfied with his life choices. "This is dangerous," her wolf murmured. "We're in deep. We know we're in deep. And I'm not even going to tell us to be careful because we wouldn't listen. We never listen. So I'm going to do what I always do, stand here, hold the clipboard, and wait for the part where I have to put us back together. For the record, the sweater has the wrong number of legs. The man has the wrong number of eyebrows in his drawings. And we're in love with him anyway. Our standards remain a mystery even to me." Noted. The thing about happiness, Sage had learned, was that it made you forget to be careful. Weeks of warmth had softened her edges, quieted the anxious voice that usually kept her braced for disaster. She was in love. She was loved. She had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I would like to point out," her wolf said, "that I specifically warned about this. The shoe. The dropping. My prediction record is flawless and unappreciated." Which was, of course, exactly when the other shoe dropped. It happened on a Thursday. A warm, golden Thursday, the kind of day that felt designed by someone who wanted you to trust it. Sage had spent the previous evening in her tiny kitchen above the bakery, making chocolates. By hand. For Rob. It had taken her 4 hours. The first batch had seized into a grainy, unappetizing lump that looked like something geological. The second batch had burned, filling her apartment with smoke and triggering her neighbor's alarm. The third batch, finally, had worked. Dark chocolate truffles, 12 of them, rolled in cocoa powder, nestled in a small wooden box she'd bought from the craft market. She'd tied it with a green ribbon, his favorite color, because she'd been paying attention too. And on the inside of the lid she'd written, in her neatest handwriting, "For the pastry boy." "She's written, 'For the pastry boy,'" her wolf had said, watching the process, "on handmade chocolates." That took 3 attempts and a smoke alarm. "This is the most emotionally vulnerable thing we've done since we told Mrs. Henley her Pomeranian was overweight. I would like it noted that I advised against the green ribbon. The green ribbon was my line. We crossed it." She brought the box to the palace. She placed it on the side table in the study, sealed, with a handwritten note propped against it. It was a gift for a human, from a woman who knew, with the bone-deep certainty of someone whose livelihood depended on it, that chocolate was poison to dogs. She would never, ever leave chocolate where a dog could reach it. Rob opened it. He read the note. "You made these?" he asked, his voice rough. "They took 3 attempts and a smoke alarm," she admitted. "I'm not a natural chocolatier." "They're perfect," he said, and the way he said it made it clear he was not talking about the chocolates. He took 1 truffle. He placed the box back on the low table beside his reading chair, the one piled with books and scrolls and a half-finished knitting project that appeared to be either a scarf or a small, confused python. He placed it there the way you put down something precious you intend to come back to. Then Julian appeared in the doorway. "Your Majesty, the Eastern Trade Delegation is here. They're early. They're also unhappy. Something about the timber tariffs." Rob closed his eyes. The timber tariffs, of course. How unhappy? The lead negotiator used the word unconscionable 3 times in the foyer. The interpreter cried. Rob looked at Sage, agonized. She laughed. "Go, be the king. I'll be here when you get back." He kissed her cheek, a quick, clumsy, wonderful thing, and then he was gone, and the chocolate sat on the low table in the warm study, the lid open, at nose height for a large and curious wolfhound. Bartholomew woke up 20 minutes later, alone. The sun was warm on his fur. His nose caught something extraordinary. The box was right there, open, and the smell was intoxicating. He was not a badly behaved dog. He was the best behaved dog in the kingdom. But he was a dog, and the box was at nose height, and there was no one to tell him no. He ate 7 truffles. By the time the wrongness started, a deep, churning unease in his magnificent stomach, it was too late. He tried to find Rob, but Rob was behind a closed door, so he went to find the other person who loved him. He made it to the garden corridor before his legs gave out. Sage was in the garden when she heard the sound. A strangled yelp, a clatter, a maid screaming. Her body went cold. "Run," her wolf said, "now." She ran. Through the garden, through the corridors. She found Bartholomew in the hallway outside the study, on his side, convulsing, vomiting dark bile streaked with chocolate. "Not dying," her wolf said, hard and sharp. "Not yet. Move. You know what to do." Sage dropped to her knees. "Someone get Dr. Thorne, now!" Her hands found Bartholomew's face, eyes rolling, gums pale, heart racing. Theobromine poisoning. Dark chocolate, the worst kind. 7 truffles, maybe 8. She tilted him, kept his airway clear, talked to him in the voice she used for frightened dogs. The voice that meant, "I'm here, you're safe, I've got you." Dr. Thorne arrived within minutes. Sage told her everything: type, quantity, time. Thorne worked with brutal efficiency, inducing vomiting, charcoal, IV line. Sage helped, steady and professional, doing everything right, even though the professional had made the thing that was killing him. She could hear running in the distance. Rob arrived at a full sprint. He saw Bartholomew, the IV, the vomit, the chocolate. And then he saw the box. The small wooden box with the green ribbon, the lid open. Sage's handwriting on the inside. He knew whose box it was. "What have you done?" His voice was barely human, low and cold, and it wasn't his voice at all. It was his father's voice. "That voice," Sage's wolf said. "That's not him. Brace." "Rob, he ate the chocolates," Sage said, still on her knees, still holding his dog. "I left them for you. The box was on the table. He must have—" "You brought chocolate into my home? You, a dog trainer." "I brought it for you. It was your gift. You left it where he could reach it." Each word was a blade, and that last one was true. She had left it. But so had he. He had placed it on the low table. He had left the lid open. He had walked out. But Rob could not see that. Seeing it would mean the person most responsible for Bartholomew's suffering was the person who loved him most, and that was a truth so unbearable his mind refused to hold it. It was easier to look at Sage. "He's blaming us," her wolf said, vibrating, "because he can't blame himself." He put the box on the table. He left it open. He walked away. And he can't look at that, so he's looking at us. "My father told me this would happen," Rob said, and his voice broke on the words, which made him angrier. "He told me that sentiment was a weakness, that caring about anything beyond duty was a liability. He was right." Sage stood up, slowly. "Are you saying this is my fault?" "I'm saying I should never have brought you here." "There it is," her wolf whispered, "the thing we always knew someone would say, that we were the mistake." "Sage," Julian said quietly from behind Rob. "He doesn't mean—" "I know he's scared," Sage said. Her voice was very calm. The calm of a person holding themselves together with their fingernails. "I'm scared too. I love that dog. But right now, His Majesty needs to be with Bartholomew. And I need to not be here." She picked up her satchel. She saw the wooden box with the green ribbon on the floor. She left it where it was. She walked away. She made it to the palace gates before her legs gave out, and she sat on the cold stone steps and cried until she couldn't breathe. "I'm here," her wolf said, curled around the raw, bleeding wound of her. "I'm always here. Cry. We'll put ourselves back together after. We always do." Rob did not leave Bartholomew's side, not for the first hour, when the charcoal was administered and the big dog shivered under heated blankets. Not for the third hour, when Dr. Thorne said cardiac rhythm is irregular, with the careful neutrality of a woman delivering news she wished she didn't have. Not at hour 6, when the tremors stopped and Bartholomew's heart finally settled into a steady, normal beat. Rob sat on the cold floor and held his dog's paw and said nothing. His wolf was silent too, the first silence in Rob's memory. Julian sat in the corner. He did not offer platitudes. He just sat there, and his being there was enough. At hour 4, Julian spoke. "You know," he said conversationally, staring at the ceiling, "when my sister's cat got into the antifreeze, she blamed her husband. Said he left the garage door open. He had. But they both knew the cat had been getting into the garage for months. Neither of them fixed the latch." Rob said nothing. The cat lived, full recovery. The marriage took longer. Not because of the antifreeze, because of what he said when he was scared. Julian looked at him. "Sound familiar?" Rob closed his eyes. "The chocolate was on the table because you put it there," his wolf said, hoarse. "The lid was open because you left it open. She gave it to you. You left it for him. And then you told the woman who made you a gift with her own hands that she was the mistake." He wanted to go to her immediately, but he realized, sitting on that cold floor, that going now would be another version of the same selfishness, rushing to fix it so the guilt would stop. She deserved space. She deserved to know that when he came, it wasn't panic. It was a choice. So he waited. 2 days. In those 2 days, Bartholomew recovered with the resilience of a creature who had no time for drama. By the second morning, he was eating again, cautiously and then with his usual refined enthusiasm, as if the whole incident had been a minor administrative inconvenience. By the afternoon, he was standing, wobbly but determined, and by evening he was sitting at Rob's feet with a look that said, "The service in this establishment has been substandard, but I am prepared to overlook it." In those 2 days, Rob sat in the chair where Sage used to sit, the wooden box on his desk, and wrote. Not a proclamation, not a letter. A list. Things I did wrong. It was long. It was specific. It was honest in a way that made his handwriting shake. And at the bottom, in smaller letters, things I am going to do differently. That list started with 1. Tell her the truth. All of it. Even the parts that make me the villain. You are not entirely your father, his wolf said quietly. You are your father in your worst moments. The rest of you is the man who compensated the baker and kept the dog and fell in love with a girl who saved strays. Decide which man goes to her. On the 3rd day, he went. Sage had not been idle. She had cried, extensively and without dignity, for the first 12 hours. She had then cleaned her entire apartment, including behind the refrigerator, which was a sure sign of emotional crisis. There's a society of dust bunnies behind that fridge that have been building a civilization since 2020, her wolf noted. We just committed genocide against an entire sentient colony. I hope we feel better about it. We don't. She had eaten an entire tube of cookie dough with a spoon, which was not a coping mechanism she was proud of, but was one she was willing to defend. The cookie dough was necessary, her wolf confirmed, medicinal. I am classifying it as a pharmaceutical intervention and will not be accepting criticism. On the 2nd day, she made a list. Reasons Rob was wrong. He was scared. He was lashing out. She had given the chocolates to the human. She had not left the box on the table. He had. She had not left the lid open. He had. The chain of causation ran through both of them, and he had removed himself entirely. Reasons it still hurt. Because she had made the chocolates. Her hands. Her kitchen. The theobromine had her fingerprints on it, and no amount of rational analysis could change that. Stop, her wolf said. Read that list like a professional. If a client called and said, I gave my partner chocolates and he left them on a low table with the lid open and the dog ate them, who would we say was responsible? We know the answer. We're just refusing to apply it to ourselves because our self-worth has the structural integrity of wet cardboard. Her wolf was right, but being right didn't make the 3 a.m. thoughts quieter. On the third day, there was a knock at her door. Rob, no crown, a plain gray shirt, wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. In his hand, a single piece of paper, folded in half. He had walked here, through the lower quarter, past the fish market and the cobbler, and climbed 4 flights of stairs. He walked, her wolf said. No entourage, no crown, no sweater, just a piece of paper. Before you say anything, Sage said, Bartholomew, is he okay? He's okay. He ate his breakfast this morning and then tried to steal Julian's shoe, so he's fully recovered. The relief was physical. Good. Then the anger was back, patient and justified. You shouldn't be here, Your Majesty. The formality was a wall. She saw him flinch. I know, and I'll leave if you want me to. But first, I wrote it down because I am catastrophically bad with words. Let him in, her wolf said. Not because he deserves it, because we deserve to hear what he has to say. She stepped aside. He stood in her apartment and seemed to take up most of it. He looked around, the mismatched furniture, the training books, the faded photo of her mother, and his eyes were soft with recognition. This was where she had built her life. Alone. He unfolded the paper. His hands were trembling. Sage, 3 days ago Bartholomew ate the chocolates you made for me, and I blamed you. His voice cracked. I put the box on the table. I left it open. I walked out without thinking. You gave me a gift, and I'm the one who left it where he could reach it. And when he got sick, I couldn't face that, so I looked for someone else to blame. He put the paper down. I did what my father does. I took the most generous thing anyone has ever done for me and turned it into evidence of your inadequacy. That is the cruelest thing I have ever done. And what I said in that hallway had nothing to do with chocolate. It had to do with the fact that I was taught to turn fear into weapons, and I aimed mine at the person least deserving of it. He said the table, her wolf breathed. He said the lid. He said it was him. He's not defending us. He's prosecuting himself. Sage looked at him, his red eyes, the piece of paper in his shaking hand covered in crossed-out lines. He had done a terrible thing. And then he had done something his father never did. He had come back. You can't do that again, she said. You can't use me as the place where your fear lands. I have my own fears, Rob. When you said what you said, you didn't just hurt me. You moved into the worst room in my head and redecorated. You handed me proof for every terrible thing I've ever believed about myself. I know. And I need you to see someone. A counselor, a therapist, a very wise old wolf who lives in a cave. I don't care. But you have patterns from your father that you cannot fix alone. And I refuse to be in love with a man who treats his pain like a weapon. The word love hung in the air. Present tense, despite everything. Present tense. Present tense, her wolf noted. She said present tense. We're not done. You still, he started, don't push your luck. But the ghost of a smile was there. Will you tell Bartholomew I'm sorry I haven't visited? He's been sitting by the door. He keeps looking at me like I've done something unforgivable, which, fair enough. He's a good judge of character. She walked to him and straightened his collar, a dog trainer's gesture, adjusting something slightly out of place. Trust has to be rebuilt the same way it was built, she said. Slowly, consistently, with patience. Can I come back tomorrow? Bring Bartholomew. I need to see him. She paused. And Rob? Leave the paper. I want to keep it. He placed it on her table, next to the half-eaten tube of cookie dough, and he left. He made it down 1 flight of stairs before his wolf spoke. Assessment. She is extraordinary. I know, Rob said aloud. You do not deserve her. I know that too. Then earn it. He passed the flower seller on the street. He stopped. He bought every single flower she had, every last one. He carried them back up the 4 flights and left them outside Sage's door without knocking. There were so many flowers they blocked the hallway. Her landlord would later describe the incident as a botanical hostage situation. When Sage opened her door an hour later and found herself facing a wall of sunflowers, daisies, wildflowers, and what appeared to be an entire rose bush, she laughed. It was a watery, broken, beautiful laugh, the kind that happens when your heart is cracked but not shattered, and light is getting in through the seams. He bought every flower, her wolf observed, every single one. The man has no concept of proportionality, and I find this infuriating and also, fine, slightly wonderful. Don't tell him I said that. Ever. The rebuilding was slow. It was supposed to be slow. Rob came to her apartment every day for a week, not as a king, alone and always with Bartholomew, who greeted Sage each time as though she'd been away for years, and who made it his personal mission to sit on her feet at all times, possibly to prevent her from leaving again. They didn't fall back into the easy warmth of before. Instead, they were something harder and braver, careful. Rob told her about the counselor Julian had found, an ancient, no-nonsense Omega named Dr. Hazel, who had told the Alpha King, within 15 minutes of their first session, that he had the emotional regulation of a startled badger, and that they would be meeting twice a week. I like Dr. Hazel, Sage's wolf said. I like anyone who tells a king he has the emotional range of a panicked woodland creature. She's terrifying, Rob said with something like admiration. Good, Sage said. Some days, Sage was angry and didn't know how to say it and went quiet. Rob had to learn to sit with that instead of trying to fix it. He's doing the face, her wolf would note. The, I want to solve this, but the problem is an emotion and I can't negotiate with it, face. Let him sit with it. Some days, Rob said something that echoed his father, a stiffness, a withdrawal, and Sage had to decide whether to push or step back. That was his father's voice, her wolf would murmur. Not his. Give him a minute. There, he caught it. It wasn't perfect. They chose each other anyway. Not because it was easy, because it was worth it. 6 months later, Rob presented her with a new box. Small, wooden, green ribbon. Inside, a single truffle. Not chocolate. Caramel and sea salt, made by his own hands over 5 hours, 1 kitchen fire, 2 burned saucepans, and a strongly worded note from the fire marshal. On the inside of the lid, in his terrible handwriting, for the girl who saved the dog. She cried. He cried. Bartholomew ate the ribbon. That, her wolf said, is how you apologize with confectionery, for the record. They were in the royal gardens, Sage elbow-deep in mud, trying to teach 20 werewolf pups the stay command. Rob was sitting on the grass letting a pup chew on his royal signet ring while another climbed his head. He was wearing a new sweater with a lopsided picture of Bartholomew on it. Bartholomew had 7 legs in the design. Bartholomew himself, fully recovered, sat beside the chaos with the posture of a man who had survived worse. You're undermining my authority, Sage said, prying a rose from a pup's mouth. I'm providing enrichment opportunities, he corrected, grinning. The unguarded grin, the one that had everything to do with being a man who had learned that happiness was not a vulnerability. You're providing chaos. He caught her eye across the lawn and smiled, and she smiled back. And Bartholomew retrieved a shoe a pup had stolen, with the weary dignity of a professional who had long ago accepted that his humans were, fundamentally, ridiculous. This, her wolf said. This loud, messy, imperfect, still being built thing. This is what we were afraid we'd never have. And we have it. Not because we deserved it, or earned it, or were destined for it. Because we chose it. Because we kept choosing it. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. Noted, Sage thought. And thank you. Don't thank me. I live here. I've always lived here. I just wish you'd listened to me sooner. Now go get that pup out of the rosebush. He's about to commit a horticultural crime. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Fairy tales are clean and finished and closed, and this was none of those things. It was a king who was learning to feel things without turning them into weapons. It was an Omega who was learning that taking up space was not a crime. It was a wolfhound with 7 legs on a sweater and impeccable manners, and the good sense to retrieve shoes when the humans were busy being ridiculous. It was not a happy ending. It was a happy continuing, and it was so much better.